Okay, thank you for the introduction. So I will talk about shape and motion. So the title of the talk is Tell Me How You Look and I Tell You How You Move. So yeah, we already saw this, or we already heard this. So I obtained my master's at Aalborg University in Denmark. I'm a PhD student at TU Braunschweig in the computer graphics lab headed by Markus Magnor. I think he was speaking here last year, maybe. And I'm working in close cooperation with the Max Planck Institute for Informatics, specifically with the Real Virtual Humans group headed by Jared Ponsmall. So what will this talk be about today? So I will demonstrate that I basically just need one photograph of you in order to make you a professional ballet dancer. So what do we see here? Well, on the left you see a picture of one of our students, and on the right you see a virtual version of him performing ballet dance. And of course he's not actually a ballet dancer, so this is just a simulated sequence. However, what we see is a rich 3D description of a motion sequence with a 3D body shape. So apparently 3D shape can be used to effectively describe motion. But let me convince you a bit more. So what we see here the same as motion sequence as before, but rather simplified. Every green dot we see corresponds to the position of one of the principal joints of the body. And even though it's the same sequence again, we have a much harder time to understand what's going on here. And it's only natural since a lot of information is abstracted away. If I add a skeleton, I think the picture gets a bit clearer. But still a lot of information is missing. We cannot see if it's a male or female subject performing. We cannot see if it's a short or a tall person, or if it's a skinny or a big person. And we can also not see which muscles are activated to perform this motion sequence. And again, we see a bit more here. Now we see it's a person as a male, probably a male person with an average height and an average weight. And we also get a notion of the muscle activations and how the fat is moving. So we get a much better picture now of the motion. And finally, this is the sequence I showed you before, and we see that identity of the person is revealed. Yeah. But unfortunately, we are not there yet. There's still a lot of information missing in this sequence I showed you compared to what we actually would see in the real world. Well, the reason for this is that humans are quite complex. So here we see something that was missing in the sequence I showed you. And this is something we also want to explain if we want to explain human motion. And this is soft tissue deformation. So these are all sequences of 3D scans of different subjects. And what you can see in these 3D scans is that we all jiggle a bit, some more, some less. But if we want to fully understand human motion and also be able to simulate realistic human motion, we need to understand this jiggling also. And of course, we all wear clothes, at least usually. And all these clothes, they create motion too. They create unique wrinkle patterns. The fabric moves dependent on the pose we take, on how fast we move, and so on and so forth. And this is also something that needs to be modeled if we want to simulate realistic human motion. So again, shape models help us to understand motion. But the question is, how do we build them? Let's start with some basic work. This is work by Lopa et al. I'm not part of not author of this work, but this is some fundamental work my work bases on a lot. And I think from here we can understand how we basically can start with how to create 3D shapes. So the idea of the authors was to collect thousands of scans of people and ask them to take various poses. So what we get is a data set of different shapes of people and different poses of people. And what they finally built from these scans is a model of shape and pose. So this is called simple. It has a set of pose parameters, it has a set of shape parameters, and you can just with these two vectors in, you get a 3D shape out. So how is simple built, or what's the math behind it? So what we start with is just a template. This is just a human shape built by a designer, and it has a set of joints. These are these white dots you can see, and a set of blend shape weights, so you can pose this model. But this has nothing to do with the actual real shapes you see in the motion. This is just made by a designer. To make this realistic, the authors added a layer on top of this template. This is just on this layer corresponds to the principal components of the shape of the shapes they scanned. So now we are able to take the slider and change the shape to shapes we saw in the data set. And now that we add another layer on top, and this is again changing the shape. Why is that? Well, if we change our pose, also our shape changes. So what looks a bit odd right now is basically just the shape we take once we are in the pose. So finally we pose the model using this blend shape, and now that we have a realistic shape of the human. So apparently 3D scanning helps, but the question is, does it scale? Who of you has a 3D scanner at home? Yeah. Who of you has access to a 3D scanner? At least one, okay. So apparently 3D scanning can't be the solution if we want to build, if we want to digitize ourselves. So what do we have all access to is video and photo. Probably all of you have a smartphone. I can see some already. So just to give you some numbers, we have 300 hours of video that are uploaded to YouTube every minute. We have more than 3 billion smartphone users worldwide, and we have 4.5 billion photo shares on WhatsApp daily. So this is really a lot of data. And this is the data I want to use, or I'm using in my research. So this is what I'm doing. So on the left side, you see a video of the subject. And on the right side, you see a digital version of him performing the same motion as seen in the video. And this is in 3D. So we could change the viewpoint of the video. We could do various things with it. Yeah. So this leads us to the first work I want to present you. This is a video-based reconstruction of 3D people models. This has been presented on CVPR last year, and it's joint work with the folks at the Max Planck Institute in Saarbrücken. So previous work, they tried to model pose and shape before, or they did it. But what they used are these models I showed you earlier, simple, or there are also other models. So they were describing what they're seeing just using these models. Well, as you can see here already, this is not really describing the whole scene. This is just a naked human that is taking roughly the pose as it is in the image. So, and we wanted to go beyond that. And for this, we revisited an old technique, namely visual hull. So what is a visual hull? In a visual hull, you take pictures of an object from various angles. And then you shoot rays into the scene. And these rays then form a visual hull. So they form a 3D shape that you can then use, that you can then calculate. However, as you saw in the video before, we have a little problem. Our subjects are moving in the sequence. So we have not just, basically not just one shape, but a lot. We use in this work 120 frames, so we have 120 unique shapes. So what's the way around this? So what we started with is, again, this model I showed you earlier. So we fitted each of the model to each of the frames, and so we have a rough description of the scene already. So we have 100 different fits of 100 different frames and 120 different poses. So how do we continue from here? What I show you here is basically the same I showed you before. On the right-hand side, you see again the silhouette of the person. On the left, you see the same image but slightly tilted. So we basically look from the side now. The red outline is just the silhouette again. And the blue lines are rays shooting from the camera into the scene, forming this red outline. And now we can find correspondences between the rays and the surface of the screen model. And after establishing these correspondences, we can do a nice trick. We know how the point on the surface was posed, because it's just a function of pose and shape. Simple is just a function of pose and shape. So we can invert this function. So we know how to bring back this point on the silhouette, on the surface back to the canonical 0 pose. And while doing this, we can take the rays with. So what we did is we just brought the image. We just brought the image into the 0 pose, each of the images. And now again, we have a visual hull problem. Because now we have 120 frames. They are all now in 0 pose. What you see here, these red dots are basically rays or the nearest point of a ray to the surface. And as you can already see, this forms a cage or a visual hull again. So what we can now do is we can try to optimize the interior naked shape to match this visual hull. And for this, we take back the simple body model, but extend it a bit. So this is just the simple body model formulation, as I showed you before, with just one added component, this D. And this D is just a vector field on top of the body model. This describes whatever is not modeled, what is not part of the model. So everything that is unique about this shape. And actually, this formulation gets even easier. We can cross out a lot because we're in 0 pose already. So it's just a optimization function of the offsets and the shape. And this can be optimized by just minimizing the point-to-line distances of the camera rays and the surface. And of course, we also use some regularization to make this smooth and nice and to remove all the noise. And now you can optimize from naked shape to closed shape or unique shape. So this is the input to the method. And this is the output. And this is all monocular single camera. And of course, this works for more than just one subject and with various backgrounds. And one of the cool features is that since we are internally using this simple body model, we can just use this shape we created and animate it and create new motion patterns. On 3DV last year we presented also an update. I won't talk about this today, but just to see, just to show you, to give you a quick teaser, we optimized the shape a bit more. We created a nicer texture, and these are some of the results of the extended method. So, and if you like this and you want to try it out yourself and you want to digitize yourself, the code in the dataset is available for research purposes. You can just go ahead and download it. So, why don't we stop here? Well, so in the last method we used 120 frames. What is kind of cool because we got a lot of detail, but the pose estimate, we need a pose for each of the frames. And this is actually a bottleneck. In this method, it took about 1 minute per frame. Nowadays, there you can probably find CNN-based detectors that are a bit faster, but you need accurate poses, and this is still a problem. Also, since it's an optimization problem, you really need these good poses. You need a good initialization, otherwise you will just end up with noise. And it's also sensitive to local minima because it's an optimization problem. And this leads us to the next project I wanted to show you. It's called Learning to Reconstruct People and Clothing from a Single RGB Camera. It's almost the same authors again. And it will be presented on this year's CVPR. So it's not presented yet, so you're one of the first to see it. And as the title says, it's learning involved this time. And we have the same setup again. On the left, you see a person performing this rotation in A pose. And again, we create a shape of the person. This time it's not animated, but we could essentially do the same. So instead of taking 120 frames, unfortunately the video is not playing. Well, okay, didn't work this time. So instead of taking 120 frames, we just take a small number of frames. And this here we show 4. In the paper we use 8 a lot, but we can actually use various numbers of frames. And we take just these 4 to 8 frames and segment them using a off-the-shelf segmenter. So this is the input to our method. And yeah, it's the input to what we call Octopus. Octopus is a CNN, so the input to this modeled RG is a set of images. And the output is already a 3D shape. So it's not optimization this time, but inference using a neural network. And the cool part about this method is that the input is images, and the output is 3D vertex locations. So we're changing the modality. So what we have to do is we encode the image information to a shared latent vector, and from this vector we decode the 3D location of the vertices. But since we have to go through this latent vector, we lose some detail. And to recover this detail, we basically take inspiration from the last method and also estimate 3D poses of these input images. So at test time, we can simply estimate also 3D poses, and we can then use them to render and compare against the input images. So we can refine the shapes we have our network predicted via optimization to a better and create a better and more detailed shape, and so we can also choose for how long we want to do this. So we get the initial estimate after a few hundred milliseconds or maybe 100 milliseconds, and then we can say, well, we want to optimize for 10 seconds, and then we get a much better shape. So how can we train this? For this training, again, we need ground truth data. And for this our ground truth data is again a data set of scans. This time it's people in clothing. So we collected a large data set of people in clothing. But as you can see here, these people just take various poses, and we want to make them, poses we probably don't want to have during training. In this project, we took A poses, so we want to have them all A poses. So what we did is we registered again the simple body model to the scan. So the scan is now driven by the body model. And what we can now do is we can simply repose it to create unique new poses and also shapes. We can also change the fitness, if you want to say so, of the models. And this is some of the results of the method. You can see you get really cool shapes that we can then set to various poses. These are just some poses from the data set. So this is not the pose the person was estimated in, just for visualization. And of course, this also again works for real world data. It looks kind of cool, and this time the optimization takes 10, maybe 20 seconds before we were in the hour and the magnitude of almost hours or hours. And again, if you want to try this, both the code and the network weights are available on GitHub, so feel free to try it out yourself. But actually, the ultimate goal would be to create a shape from just a single image. And this shape should be detailed. What do I mean by detailed? By detailed, I mean it should have hair, it should have clothing, it should have all these folds and wrinkles we can see in the picture. Well, and this actually leads us to the last project I wanted to present today, text to shape, detailed full human body geometry from a single image. Again, with almost the same authors. And this is unpublished work, so you're one of the first. You can actually see this. Not many people have seen this before. It's an archive. You can see it there, but it's not published yet. Yeah. So we made some observations. Some of them I already told you while presenting. So if you build your method on a silhouette, you ignore actually a lot of information. You have really good information about the outline of the person, but you ignore completely the interior. And one interesting cue is shading. So yeah, how the light changes the appearance of the shape. And this I already also told you. So if you go from vertices, if you go from pixels to vertices, you have an unaligned problem. So you have to go through some low-dimensional latent code to change the modality. But if you want to compare vertices and pixels, you can do this via rendering, but you have to have 3D poses in order to recreate the image and compare. So this inspired us to a slightly different pipeline that you can see here. So input to the method is just a photograph, but then we transform it into a different representation, namely a UV map. And from this UV map, we estimate normals and displacements that then can be again applied on the 3D shape with the same mapping. So we have here an aligned image-to-image translation problem. We go from UV map to UV map. You don't change the modality any longer, and this helps. So, but what is this UV map? So a UV map is basically just a 2D representation of the surface. Every triangle, every face of the surface has just a counterpart in this 2D, two-dimensional image. So we just have a mapping between the 3D surface and the 2D image. And of course, every triangle is mapped. This is used a lot for texturing, for example, but also for other things, for example, these normal maps I'm using. And, maybe you know this, but I really like this tweet. So nothing better than Christmas chocolates to explain UV mapping. So you just take this 2D image and wrap it around your 3D shape. So, but how can we go from the image to the UV shape? We only have the mapping between the 3D shape and the UV map. Well, there comes Unposed to the rescue. Unposed is a method that was presented, I think, also last year in CVPR by folks from Facebook. So Unposed gives us a 2D pose of the image. But this 2D pose is encoded in UV coordinates. So every pixel in this Unposed detection mapped to a point in this UV map. And with this, we can then simply build a unwrap or a texture or incomplete texture by just taking the input image and the Unposed detection. Then we look up the pixel in the Unposed detection and write it into the UV map. And this, then we have an incomplete texture, basically, so to say. And this is then the input to our text-to-shape network. So text-to-shape is a pix-to-pix style generative adversarial network. So we have a UNet generator that goes from this incomplete UV texture map to the normal and the displacement map. And then we have a discriminator that tries to understand if this is a real or a fake UV map and displacement map. So then, and the target of the generator is to fool the discriminator. So the generator learns from the discriminator how to fool it and how to create a really real displacement and a normal map. And then if this, this normal map and this displacement map, you can just apply on the naked surface again using this UV mapping. So how do we train this? Again, we have this data set I showed you before with this roughly 2,000 body scans, and from these body scans we created this normal and displacement maps, and we can just render these images, these scans to create realistic images. And we did this also with different poses and varying illumination. So this time we are not restricted to these A poses, but we take whatever pose, and we render it with different illumination to simulate realistic illumination conditions in real-world images. And it turned out that that works really, really good. So what do we see here? On the left-hand side, you see the input image. Right next to it in gray is the 3D shape that was used to render this image. And in green, you see our result. And what you can see is that also on the back side of the model, we see clothing folds and wrinkles. And this is, of course, because the generator learned from the discriminator that a realistic displacement has wrinkles also on the back side. So our network can not only estimate what's in the image, but also hallucinate what could be on the back side of the model. And this also works quite well for realistic images. You see a lot of results here. So this is probably the case because we rendered these scans in various conditions, and the network can generalize to real-world data well, while being only trained on synthetic data. And again, you can see here that there are realistic wrinkle patterns also on the back side of the model. And yeah, just some comparisons. On the left, you see BodyNet and Cyclopy. These are voxel-based methods, so they go from images to voxels. And you see they are really lacking some detail. In the middle, you see a method that is just using the simple body model. So this is all you can get without displacements or displacement maps or whatever. And then in purple, you see the result of the method I showed you earlier. This is using 120 frames, while this new method only uses one single frame and runs in 50 milliseconds. So this is quite a leap forward. And you can see these new models feature the highest level of realism. And again, code and model will be available, so it's not available right now. But once this paper is published, hopefully soon, I will make all of this available for the research community. So the question is, what's next? Well, there's still some part missing. One thing that's missing is what I showed you in the beginning. We still don't know how these wrinkle patterns are formed by motion. We saw in the last work that we can mimic wrinkle patterns, but we still don't have a model of it. We still don't know how to form them. If you want to repose the model, how the wrinkle patterns should change. Another thing that's missing is hair. We have no idea yet how the hair changes with the pose, with the motion. What you see in our results is basically just a helmet. It's had nothing to do with hair. It looks nice, but it's not hair. So this is something that's completely missing in our models. And if we take a step further and maybe go beyond pose and shape, there's another interesting thing that we would like to study or understand. This is social interaction. So how do we move? What gestures do we do when we interact with each other? So let's draw a conclusion. So 3D virtual humans help us to understand shape and motion of real humans. So if we want to achieve realism, we need to learn digital humans by capturing real ones. So we can learn how the real humans look like and how they move and how they deform basically by learning digital models, and we learn these digital models from the real ones. So, and consumer camera data will help us to learn better models. As I said before, the 3D scanning can't be the solution. We don't have 3D scanners at home, so we need to take the data that we have, and this is consumer camera data. And yeah, one of the main missing components in current statistical body models is closing. So the next step is hopefully closing, and people are already working on this. So how does our clothes change while we move? Thank you. I think we have time for questions.
There's one question. I'll bring you the microphone so we can all hear.
Hi, I'm Carita from the Art and Media from DAMK. So have you used any data that is available in the animation industry? Because it sounds to me here, because I know a couple of things about it, and it sounds to me that you're reinventing the wheel, because the animation industry has been researching these things for the last 90 years.
Well, we don't use data from the animation industry. these models we use, well, it could be that they are available in the animation industry, but not for research purposes. So it's freely available models that we use. And I'm not aware that, that there are video-based reconstruction methods in the animation industry.
There are those two, and I mean, the animation industry has been researching movement and clothing and how hair and everything works for 90 years now.
Yeah, but it's, as far as I know, it is often driven by an artist.
No, actually not.
No, actually
It's,
not. Okay, then maybe
yeah,
we
like
need to take
Walt
this offline
Disney.
and to show me what.
Yeah. Walt Disney Studios has a lot of engineers who have been really doing a lot on these things for like 60, 70 years now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? So I have one question. So you're focused now on the human model, obviously, and you have the canonical model for the human. Could you kind of consider extending this model to different shapes, let's say animals and then objects?
Actually, there is work on this, not
Okay.
by me, but by the folks who actually released this first model. They have a model of animals too.
Okay.
Simple question. Does this model can capture like really tiny movements like finger movements or even the toes?
The model I'm using is not capable of using this, but there's a new model that is released or will be released very soon that also features face and fingers.
Okay. Any more questions? Maybe just a final question. You showed these kind of renderings of the bodies in the kind of, let's say, hypothetical poses. How do you evaluate like the success of the degree of realism? Is it by subjective analysis or have you any objective methods?
Both. We have, for the first two papers, we measured, we have rendered out scan sequences, so we know ground truth, and we just measured like the surface-to-surface distance, and we're going down to 4.5 millimeters. And for the paper I didn't present today, we actually made a user study judging the degree of realism.
Okay, so let's thank Thiemo again for his nice talk.